show. I'm going to just send this out on Twitter. I think I can. Let me see if I can get the link really quick. All right. Okay, yes, here. Get the link. Show. I'm going to. Ooh, reverb. Okay. I'm gonna just so I'm gonna get the link here. I'm gonna send it on Twitter. So if anyone wants to join as well. All right. Post. Yeah. Post here. Cool. Live stream talking G League off season, 2A's rosters, and let's see, and trades. Feel free to join. And 2A roster. All right. Cool. So I'll pretty much just be talking about news that's kind of going on with the NBA, but also how it's affecting maybe guys in the G League. I think I'm just going to kind of get straight into it. And then we also, let's see, I'm new to using Streamlabs, I believe. So I'm trying to see if there's a way. I think I can keep, okay, perfect. I can keep a live chat so I can make sure I can see if anyone has any questions. So, okay, let's first talk about Tyler Kolek here. So this is interesting. So we're seeing here that, today they signed Malcolm Brogdon. They've also, yesterday signed, Garrison Matthews and Landry Shamet. They are starting to round out their roster, and they are talking about potentially having to move a guy who is on a guaranteed contract. Potentially could that be, Miles McBride, or could that even be Tyler Kolek? Tyler Kolek, and I'm bringing him up because you played in the G League a lot last year. He's a guy who couldn't really break through as much under, Tibbs, and this is probably a very important year for him. I think for his career going into his second year, especially, with a new head coach, he has an opportunity to show that he deserves backup point guard minutes. And so the question is, does New York really move on and consider giving Tyler Kolek more of an opportunity moving forward, or do they decide to move on from him? His summer league, he didn't have the best summer league, probably some jitters, going into that, because especially when you have a new head coach like Mike Brown, those are the things. And if at least what this report here is saying is that at least one opposing team has demonstrated interest in Kolek this offseason. I mean, I'm not surprised. I think Tyler Kolek is I think he's a good player. I think he has the potential to be a good point guard in the NBA. So I don't know. I'm very curious to see what they end up doing here with the the situation with Brogdon, Garrison Matthews, and Landry Shamet. Who they move? If they already even move like Pacome Dadier, but Pacome Dadier is still really young. I think he's 20 now. His biggest thing at Summer League is that he has to continue to improve as a 3-point shooter. He shot about 31% from three in the G League this past year. That's going to be his huge thing for Dadier, is being able to knock down shots at the NBA and the G League level. And so let's see here what happens with both of those guys. I just thought that was a little bit newsworthy because I think those are some guys who did spend time, this past year with the Westchester Knicks. But yeah, so I think I'm going to kind of, unless I get any questions or if anyone who's in the chat wants to talk about anything specifically, I'm just going to start going through and talking about some of the transactions. I talked about two-way contracts. So I think the most recent one was EJ Liddell and Olivier Maxence Prosper, who played for the Mavs. He's a very interesting prospect for the Grizzlies, who just decided to go and sign him. If you don't know, he played, I believe, at Marquette. He's from Canada. As you can see, there's a photo right there of him. And so, with Olivier, I think the most important thing is be able to knock down his 3-point shots. I think that's going to be the thing he's going to have to demonstrate for the Grizzlies. He loves playing defense. I remember I'd watched I think it was an interview last year at Summer League. He was talking about how one of the most important things that he loves is he loves sitting in stance. He loves defending, and that's going to be huge, I think, in his career. If he can really knock down 3-point shots consistently, he can be a good player. And I think especially when you got Cooper Flag coming in, I had a feeling there was a potential chance he wouldn't be with the Mavericks anymore. But I'm happy at least that he got an opportunity with the Grizzlies. He's going to get he has a 2-way contract now. I think I had probably a while ago had put out like a depth chart, but you at least see that he'd probably be the small forward or power forward on that Memphis Hustle team. And so I think this was a great opportunity for him, for the Grizzlies. I really like this move. And I think if you look at what happened with Jemiah Meshach, their second round pick from the Grizzlies, I believe I saw a Twitter, somebody had tweeted, one of the reports for the Grizzlies had said that Meshach is going to start with the Memphis Hustle this year. And so that pretty much means that with him starting, that does count for one of the 10 roster spots that the Grizzlies the Memphis Hustle, that they get. So each G League team only gets 10 roster spots. So with Meshach going to the Hustle and just starting with him immediately and not on a 2-way or as a assignment player, he does count for one of the 10 spots with the Hustle. So that is something the Grizzlies do have to plan around. And I think I saw something, this was maybe from Hoops Rumors, they talked about every year, the past, I think 3-4 years, there's always been a player in the second round who's always been on the G League team. I think it was like Mojev King, who I think for the Mad Ants had played just with the Mad Ants, but he was the second round pick for the Pacers. So we do see it. It does happen. I think so. I'm curious to see. Yeah, let's see how Jemiah Meshach does. But I think the Memphis Hustle have a very interesting team this year. I'm really curious to see how they're going to look. So I think let's see. So next player on a 2-way contract I do want to talk about recently was EJ Liddell. EJ Liddell, if you don't know him, he played at Ohio State, but he actually played for the New Orleans Pelicans. He was drafted there. I believe he had an ACL injury his first year, his rookie year, which really, obviously was a big injury. And so he didn't really get to play much, I think, till the 23 to 24 season. I got to see him when he played with the Squadron. I've seen him also play at Summer League. And I felt he looked better coming off the injury. And so, he's a guy who looked good in stretches, I thought, with Windy City, with Chicago. I remember he had some points where he's knocking down 3-pointers. He's moving well, I felt like, with the ball, but he's not a guy who's the quickest as a defender. Like, his lateral quickness isn't his strongest suit, but he can knock down shots. I actually was looking at stats earlier today, and I do think his stats looked pretty good for the G League side, and I thought that was actually intriguing, especially compared to him coming back after his ACL injury. If you look here, he actually shot 27% from 3. Again, this is after an ACL injury, starting to play basketball again. But then his next year, he ended up shooting 36.3% with the Windy City Bulls, which I thought was a really good number. But also a huge thing was almost getting 1 steal a game, and he had 2.3 blocks, which is really, really good. So I think the 3-and-D side is probably going to be his strongest suit. Again, he's not the quickest defender, but if he can really knock down shots, if these blocks translate to the NBA, I think he could be a good player, potentially for the Nets. I mean, the Nets right now are in that process of searching for talent. They're looking for players who potentially could be part of that rotation piece moving forward. I mean, the way I always think about it, this is just like my perspective, but I always think you develop guys who you find those diamonds in the rough, and if they end up becoming solid NBA rotation players, they start to build value, and then potentially other teams might be willing to trade something. Like, I think if you look at Moussa Diabate from the Charlotte Hornets, he actually played 2 seasons with the LA Clippers. he was pretty much a guy kind of like a diamond in the rough who the Hornets decided to go after, and they ended up it worked out. Like they had the injuries with Mark Williams, Nick Richards, and Diabate was able to play. He got his opportunity, which a lot of these guys in the G League sometimes just need. They need that opportunity, but Diabate he did really well, and so the thing I'm even curious about is I think you now look at that as like a potential player where now Charlotte has Ryan Kalkbrenner, Diabate, Mason Plumlee. Like they have a lot of centers on that roster. And so eventually, do they ever move on from Diabate? But now, are you looking at like potential? Can you get a pick out of it? Like that's what I'm saying here. Like that's what I think the Nets' approach is, looking at guys diamonds in the rough who, they just need the opportunity, and he will. I think EJ Liddell could get more of an opportunity in Brooklyn. Hopefully this year with the Nets, especially because they have a lot of guys competing. I mean, it's going to be pretty much competing against each other, for playing time. We saw last year Tyrese Martin was a guy who they brought in. He had a really good year with Brooklyn. He had kind of bounced around with the G League with different teams, but he got his opportunity, and he looked good at the Nets. And so I think it's just about opportunity. Drew Timme, another guy who's kind of bounced around between the G League and the NBA, got his opportunity, and so let's go see what happens with Liddell. I'm really curious to see how he looks with Long Island. I think Long Island, they have a good team, especially, and I think I'm going to start segueing into some of the trades. So I'm going to pull this up, gleaguetransactions.com, or the part of their website. We had a big trade that happened this past week. It was Yuri Collins and Malachi Smith were traded to the Long Island Nets. I do think that was a really big trade because they're starting to gradually, put together their roster. All right. Yes. So, okay. Here. So, look, Sean Marks did say there was a potential chance that their 5 rookies could spend time with Long Island this year. And that is something I think, if that is a possibility, that's why I wrote it down here. And so, but imagine, let's just say those 5 do not spend time here. This is what you're looking at for the Nets rosters for Long Island. Tyson Etienne, Yuri Collins. Yuri Collins, the guy they traded for, is probably one of the best playmakers in the G League last year. He spent 2 years with Santa Cruz. Let's just pull up his G League stats. I think that'd probably be more helpful if you don't know his game as well. So Yuri Collins last year with the Santa Cruz Warriors had 10.7 assists, 3.9 turnovers, 1.4 steals. He shot 27.8% from 3. So obviously his shooting's not maybe his strongest suit, but he is one of the best playmakers, I would honestly say, in the G League. And so you bring in Yuri Collins, who can definitely be a good playmaker for this Long Island Nets team, behind Tyson Etienne. Also, I think you could even move Tyson to the 2 and maybe put Yuri at the 1, and maybe because Tyson, I think, is a good shooter. That's something I was thinking a lot about too, as a possibility. So you also traded for Malachi Smith, who, he's a guy who's bounced around different G League teams over the years. And pull up his stats as well. He's, I think one of his biggest things is that, I'd probably say is that his shooting, like you can see here, his 3-point shooting was 41.6% from 3. Obviously went down, in the last season with the hustle. He's shooting a little bit more, but he can shoot the ball. I think you can see here in his earlier seasons, he's a career 3-point shooter, 38.3% from 3. So I think he's also a great addition for the Long Island Nets. So I really do like the idea of bringing him in. Kyle Rose is also a great move because he's a great perimeter defender. His 3-point shooting hasn't translated to the G League as well as it did in college, but if he can really improve that, I think that's a huge thing. And so Kyle Rose, let me also talk about him too. So Kyle Rose, he played for the Mexico City Capitanes last year. Trying to think, where did he go to college? Actually, let me see. Oh yeah, Fordham. Okay, so 25% from 3, like I said, not his strongest suit, but he gets 1.4 steals, zero point 0.5 blocks. And like I said, his strongest thing is it probably is more of his perimeter defense. And I think if he can really, if he's able to do that at a high level continuously at the G League, and if he can just improve that 3-point shooting, I think that's going to be huge. Obviously, 42.9% from his free throw, that still will need work, but I think the shooting is going to improve hopefully for him, and if he can continue to be a good defender, I think that's going to be huge for the Long Island Nets. And then I think you also have potentially some competition. I think I'm gonna say his name right, Fanbo Zeng. I think he's from China. Grant Nelson from Alabama. These are guys that are competing for a two-way contract spot, and so let's see what ends up happening with Long Island. I think they're a very intriguing team this year, especially with all those draft picks that Brooklyn ended up taking in. Like I don't think anybody actually thought they were going to draft 5 guys. I thought at least one of them, you were going to trade one of those 5 picks away, but they did. So that's going to be fun to watch this year with the Nets. All right, let's see. I'm going to talk about other transactions. So let's see. Okay, I actually do want to talk about the Tivian Jones trade. So, and I'll kind of also talk about Jalen Williams here too. So the Grand Rapids Gold. So they've been making some moves right now this offseason. They've been kind of putting together guys, with their G League team. And so they traded away guys who were both with them for 1 year last year. Jalen Williams. This is Jalen Williams, I believe, from Auburn. Just for clarification. And then Tavian Jones, who actually, where did he play? I'm going to look that up really quickly. Tavian Jones, he played, Illinois? Okay, he played for Illinois. I think, so the big thing was the South Bay Lakers acquired Tavian Jones in a recent trade. So he's a guard, he's a 6'7" guard. South Bay is starting to put together an intriguing roster here, but I'll come back to South Bay in a sec. But the big thing is the Grand Rapids Gold. They've been kind of making moves. You can see that they actually also did a trade with Jameer Young and Moses Brown. So the Moses Brown trade I really like because I like the idea of a guy who can really offensively rebound the ball for the Gold, and who does have the ability to, hopefully, if he can work on his passing, if he can at least find guys who are open, especially Curtis Jones or Tamar Bates, if he's able to just kick the ball out, or to Kessler Edwards, like that, I think could be a huge thing for the Gold. But getting a guy like Moses Brown for the Nuggets, let's kind of look at. I wanted to look at Zeke Najee's contract, because Zeke Naji, he got, I believe, the extension. Was it not his past year, but the year before that kicked in last year? So maybe he is a guy that they potentially do trade. I mean, let's look at the Nuggets depth chart. Like, do they bring in Moses Brown to, like, as a third center on this team? You have, actually, it's DeAndre Jordan. I'm pretty sure DeAndre Jordan's a free agent. Let me actually look at, there's a different depth chart. Oh, this isn't updated. Okay, let me look at here. Okay, I think this one's, oh yeah. So your third center on this team, I would really argue, would be Zeke Naji. So, do you really keep Zeke Naji as your third center? Do you keep Moses Brown if he has a really good training camp? Could they potentially look at him down the line? I mean, that is the one thing, and I do say that is also the challenge with, being with the Grand Rapids Gold versus the Nuggets. I'll just pull this up. The Grand Rapids Gold, if you look here in Michigan, let's just do this, Denver, it is one of the farther G League teams. So it is one of the farther G League teams. And so it does make it a little bit harder for the Gold to, the Nuggets to be able to actually go and, go back and forth and be able to see how the Gold are doing, how the players are putting into the system are doing versus, like, say, for example, like the Wizards and the Capital City Go-Go, who are like right there, literally use the same facility, or the LA Lakers and South Bay Lakers who use the same facilities. Like, it is challenging on that end. But if he is making good progress, maybe he is a guy that maybe they do bring in eventually as a third center if they decide to move on from Zeke Nnaji. Maybe they trade Zeke Nnaji at the NBA trade deadline, call it Moses Brown. Again, we don't know yet. It just depends on how these guys play. Moses Brown, I think, let's actually pull up how many. I think he's played for a lot of teams throughout his career. He's 25 too. I mean, he was young when he got drafted in 2019. Yeah, so obviously you can see here he's played for a lot of different NBA G League teams. Some guys in his situation at this point in their career would have gone overseas. And I do respect the fact that Moses Brown has stayed, in the U.S. and to keep trying. I do have to respect that that he's still wanting to give it a shot, even again another year and play in the G League and hopefully and play in the NBA. And he's had good numbers. I thought, he played well. I thought at least with the Mavericks, but obviously just the situation with their salary cap and they just couldn't keep him long enough. And so it was unfortunate, but I think also his conditioning, I thought, improved, at least throughout the season. That's something he did talk about this year with Westchester, is that he was trying to continuously working on that. And I think I noticed he did actually play a lot more when I was at the Capital City Go-Go game against the Westchester Knicks. Now, he actually did play a lot more minutes in the first half than I was initially expecting. So I hope that Moses Brown does get an opportunity to stick. And so we'll see what happens there, but let's see. I was going to go back here. So I want to go back to South Bay Lakers. So the Tavian Jones trade's interesting because I think they're starting to put together their team. When I counted it last, they have 6 players. So they have their 4 affiliate players. So Lakers, 4 affiliate players. Okay. RJ Davis, Eric Dixon, Arthur Kaluma, Augustus Marcelinus. I think I'm saying that right. But those are the 4 affiliate players. So you have those 4. I talked about this in one of my videos, but pretty much I think one of those 4 guys, I think will get that last 2-way contract spot with the Lakers. If you again don't know, I'll explain this really quickly. Each NBA team is allowed to sign only 4 guys on affiliate player spots. So essentially, if they cut one of those 4 essentially, if they go into a G League season with those 4 guys, then they cannot cut, for example, was it Nico Mannon, I believe? Their other 2-way, Chris Mannon, my bad. Chris Mannon, their other 2-way contract player, he's undrafted. He does not have any G League rights with a G League team. So if he gets cut during the season, he cannot return to South Bay if all 4 of these guys do report. Now, I just that's why it makes me think, like, would they really go into the South Bay season bringing all 4 of these guys, into the season? I would imagine they're going to keep one of those spots open so they can at least have 3, put one on a 2-way. So if you do that, you have 3 guys as your affiliate player spots. Okay, then you also have recent trade Jared Cumberland. You also have Tavian Jones. So that's 5. And then you also have Kyler Kelly, who is 6. So that's 6 roster spots. And then you also have your 2-ways, which adds up to 9. And you can only have 13 roster spots with the 2-ways. So it's 10 regular roster spots. 3 players then adds to 13 with the 2-way contract players. So that's pretty much 4 spots left that they can fill. If I still think that if I still am right, I do think they still have the number 1 pick in the G League draft. And if they do keep that pick, that could be number 10. So that'd be 10 spots. That means they can add 3 more players. Do they add maybe somebody from last year? Do they add a Quincy Oliveri? Now, Quincy Oliveri, he didn't play Summer League this past year with the Lakers. He actually played Summer League with the Brooklyn Nets. So I haven't seen anything yet trade-wise. I just don't really know what his situation is. To my understanding, he's still a free agent, so he hasn't signed anywhere. He's still he's over doing stuff with endorsements right now with Steph Curry. I think it's fair to say he's probably going to play in the G League this year. we don't know yet where, though. Obviously, I love Quincy Oliver. He's probably was one of my favorite players last year in the G League. So I'm really actually curious to see where he goes next. But who else could potentially come back from last year's team for South Bay? That's just going to be the next thing, really, as they start to put together that roster. I don't think South Bay does tryouts. I know in the G League there is the option that teams can technically have players count as a tryout player and work out privately as a tryout. And so they did that last year with DeJuan Gordon, who maybe he's a guy who comes back. I mean, again, we still don't know. You also have to think about Adu Thuro, who's going to spend a lot of time probably with South Bay. He was hurt for Summer League, so he didn't play. So he's going to be needing time in the G League this year to get himself ready. So I think, that's just something I want to talk about with South Bay. But, okay. So, all right. I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break, get some water, and then we'll get straight back into this. So stay tuned. All right, we are back. So, let's kind of go back into some more moves. All right, what else happened? So, okay, I actually did want to talk about this Bryson Warren trade too. So, Bryson Warren was a player who the Sioux Falls Skyforce they've had him around for the past 2 seasons. I guess technically within the Heat, umbrella. He played at Overtime Elite. So he got traded his returning rights to the Westchester Knicks. And that was also a pick that the Westchester Knicks did acquire as part of that 3-team trade with Moses Brown and Jameer Young. And, for Westchester, they got the 2026 first-round pick that the Stockton Kings had given to Nicole through the Jalen Williams trade. And so that pick has, now gone to Westchester. Potentially, you never know. You never know who could be bad next year. Again, with rankings, the G League, the worst team gets the number 1 pick. There's no lottery, like I've said this before. So if Stockton was the worst team, Westchester is the number 1 pick. Like, that's just how that works. So that, I think, so you always want to kind of keep those picks, controlling another team's 2026 first-round pick can be actually notable for maybe those reasons, especially if you look at what has happened with South Bay. But Bryson Warren's a really young player, from Overtime Elite. I mean, he's only 20 still. which is pretty wild actually to think about. And so let's kind of look at his stats. And I think so he this past year had 13.9 points per game, was shooting 39% from three, and 3.2 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 1.1 steals. So he has intriguing numbers with the Skyforce this past year. Probably, he's 6'3", 175, so he has to continue to get stronger there. But, that's huge, I feel like. And so I think getting him and that 2026 first-round pick was a really good move for Westchester. I think ultimately they probably knew they had to, probably give up the pick. Probably have to give up the pick and, and Bryson Warren, to get Moses Brown, because Moses Brown is a bigger caliber player than Bryson Warren. But I think also a huge thing too was Jahmir Young, and I am going to talk about the 4 Exhibit 10 players that the Heat did just sign recently. Let's see, Sioux Falls Skyforce. Oh wait, actually it should be Miami Heat. Okay, so the Heat have signed 4 guys. Dane Diansha, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. Trevor Keels, who we'll get to in a sec. Gabe Madsen and Jahmir Young. So those are the 4 guys they just signed to Exhibit 10. Now, Gabe Madsen and Dane, or if I'm saying his name right, those 2 guys will be affiliate players with the Sioux Falls Skyforce. There was another player, I believe his name was Steven Settle. I'm just make sure that's correct, but Settle the third. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, Steven Settle the third. So I believe he also they agreed to an Exhibit 10 with the Heat. I think one of the reporters with the Miami Heat did confirm that the plan is still to sign him. So if that is the 3 players that the Heat are signing, if they sign one more guy to an affiliate player spot, the 4 that you're allowed. They cut Vlad Golden from Michigan, who they've signed on a 2-way contract after the draft. Vlad Golden cannot come back to the Skyforce if he's cut from the Heat. And so that is one thing they do have to be careful. Do they really sign another guy? I guess we'll see as we kind of get closer to the G League season. But I think that was just a huge thing that I had noticed with Miami. But kind of talking a little bit about these 2 guys they got on returning rights. So Trevor Keels was not expecting him to sign with the Skyforce, but actually his rights were recently traded for in the Zion Pullen trade, where they actually swapped. But actually, the Skyforce were able to get a first-round pick this year for this year's G League draft. And so usually, a lot of times when, I won't say it's every single time, but most times when there's a pick attached to the rights of a returning player, usually that returning player more likely isn't going to be joining the G League team. But this time it did happen this way. And I'm wondering if, why did they not just swap the rights of Zion Pullen and Trevor Keels? Why did they even have to add the draft pick? That's something I was actually really curious about. Did the Heat just have a lot more interest in Zion Pullen, who did get caught up technically to the Grizzlies on a 2-way in January after he had a really good January. Maybe the Heat still wanted to keep him and they decided, but maybe he felt like he had a better opportunity with the Minnesota Timberwolves and Iowa Wolves, and so maybe that was why they made the trade. So again, Trevor Keels now is going to be joining the Skyforce. He spent 2 years with the Iowa Wolves. He was probably one of the top players for the Iowa Wolves, but a former Duke player, played with the New York Knicks, and now he's going to be joining the Sioux Falls Skyforce this year. And Jahmir Young, who actually what's funny here is Trevor Keels and Jahmir Young, they're both from the DMV area. Actually, Jahmir Young, I believe, is closer from DC, and Trevor Keels, I believe, is from the Virginia area. Yeah, so he went to both DMV guys. He went to PVI. So both. I think that's kind of cool. Just like a neat fact about him is that both of those guys are from the area. But And that is another thing that you're starting to look at this Heat or the Skyforce rosters that are starting to put together some of their team. Gabe Masson, I'm not too familiar with his game actually, but let me see. I know he was with the Warriors, I believe, on Summer League. Is he a shooting guard? Yes. Okay, so he's a shooting guard. So a lot of guards so far that they've signed, and then they also have Golden as well. So that's something I'll be kind of monitoring pretty closely is what they end up doing to bring in more front court to the Skyforce roster. But I thought that was huge. And I want to talk a little bit more about Jahmir Young. Jahmir Young, he played with the Grand Rapids Gold last year, then got caught up on a two-way with the Chicago Bulls, and then, got cut from Chicago after Summer League. And then his, now going to be playing for the Heat with the Sioux Falls Skyforce. Really quickly, and trying to check, do the Heat have... Oh, yes, they do have two-way contracts. I think they have one more two-way contract. I believe they do have one more two-way contract. Yes, okay. So they have an open two-way contract spot. So, one of those guys could compete for that last two-way contract spot. And actually, let's see. Yeah, so maybe it is possible that they could sign one more affiliate player and put that player on, that open spot. And then that would be 3 affiliate players, 2 guys on two-way contracts. If you cut one of them, you can still bring that one player back to the Skyforce as an in-season affiliate player. Myron Gardner, I really do like him as a player. I think he is a really good energy guy. He was the guy guarding J.D. Davidson when the Osceola Magic, which is where Myron Gardner was playing this past season, when they played against each other in the Eastern Conference Finals, Maine versus Osceola, he was really good, doing a good job, slowing down J.D. Davidson. And I thought, for him to have a good summer league with the Heat, for him to get a call-up, his first call-up of his career, I mean, he's a guy who I remember he's another player who was drafted in the G League and has really worked himself up to this point. And so really cool to see him. I think he's actually a Heat player, so I love this move a lot. But Skyforce are looking like a good team, and so I'm also excited about them. All right, I'm trying to see. I think I've kind of gone through a lot of these. Yes, I've talked about some of these. Yeah, okay. I'll probably just talk about Evan Gilliard a little bit here. And I'll probably then close it off and talk about the Hawks. So Evan Gilliard, he was a tryout player for the Windy City Bulls a couple of seasons ago. He made the team and then got traded to the Raptors 905, where he had a really good year with the 905. Let me see if it'll show me his stats. I mean, in 27 minutes, he got 12.3 points per game, shooting 38.3% from 3. 87.5% from the free throw line, 5.1 assists, and almost a steal a game. And I remember I saw him play when the 905 came to play against the Capital City Go-Go, and he looked, in that game against the Go-Go, he had, I think, 6 or 7 threes. Like, he was on fire in that game. And so I think with, with Evan Gilliard, I think that is, like, a nice thing to see how he's continuing to trend up. And I think the 905 just talks a lot about their development curve, of like what they've done, finding a player they liked, having him have a good year. And they were able to get a first-round pick out of him. Like, they didn't trade a first-round pick to get him. They just traded returning rights of a player and just swapped. They got a first-round pick out of this. And so the 905 did sign Jarkel Joyner, who, he was from the College Park Skyhawks, just signed Exhibit 10 with the Toronto Raptors, and that pretty much sets the way for him to join the Raptors 905. But I think, Evan Gilliard's now going to go to Memphis Hustle and now has a chance to be potentially the backup point guard for the Hustle. And so he'll be backing up Javon Smalls, and I think that's going to be it's going to be a fun team to watch in Memphis. So I'll just talk about it straight up. So here. So Charles Bassey, he signed a Exhibit 10 with the Atlanta Hawks. So I think that is notable because the Hawks have now filled all 4 of their affiliate player spots. That's where things get interesting, and I talked about this in my tweet breakdown. if you look at the situation with the Hawks, I think when you have 4 affiliate player spots, they're all filled, and then you have two-way contracts, and your two-way contracts or two-way contract players who don't have returning rights will be L.A. Nadaya and Jacob Toppin. Those two guys. Now, they have to make a decision. Do they keep those guys in the organization? They did also talk about Lamont Butler had agreed to a two-way contract after he went undrafted to play with the Atlanta Hawks, but I don't really know if anything of that happened later. So I don't know if it's still an Exhibit 10 or if it really is still going to be a two-way. So I think that's something to monitor as well. But I think, if you look at this pretty much says that them having those 4 guys on affiliate player spots, Nadaya or Jacob Toppin cannot come back to College Park. So they have to be really careful how they're going to manage the situation. Do they cut maybe N'Faly Dante, give Charles Bassey that spot as the center? Do they cut maybe one of these two-way contract guys and give Caleb Houston or Lamont Butler or Kobe Johnson that two-way contract spot? That could be the way they flip it, where they could then get at least one of these 2 guys back on an affiliate player spot. They're not going to be able to get both. And so one of these guys won't be eligible to join College Park this year. And so I'm curious which one of the two. I did see that L.A. Nadaya did have an injury this past year. And so I am really curious, is he going to be healthy to play this year? Are they just trying to get his affiliate player rights? That's something I've been looking at very closely. Is that partially why they signed Charles Bassey? Because maybe Charles Bassey will play those 60 days with College Park this year, and then as soon as Nadai is back from his injury, then he starts to play, and maybe that's when Bassey goes. That's what I thought was very interesting about the signing. Obviously, I do read into these things a lot, but again, from the G League level, I'm curious to how this is going to all impact the Skyhawks. But I think the Skyhawks, they have an interesting team. They have some returners like Dwight Murray Jr. They traded for Javon Johnson's returning rights, who played well after summer league team. And then they also have Asa Noel, and I guess potentially have Caleb Houston. And so they have a good squad of guys who've been different players from different G League and NBA teams, or maybe top guys who were top players in high school. A lot of different experiences that are going to make the Skyhawks roster. So yeah, I think that's it for this week, guys. I think as of right now, there's not been too much. I thought at least this week. I think this week was a little slow trade-wise. If I can pull it back up. I think I had it. Oh, yeah, it was here. I think, this week was a little bit slow. It was just mostly these trades. But I think as we get closer to the NBA season, things will start picking up. So I'll continue, probably do some of these as we kind of get closer and closer to the season, especially with the G League roster starting to really come together. So, but yeah, if you watch this, thank you so much. Always appreciate the support. And this is the NBA 2K